Okay, so today we're going to talk Splunk. You have recently published your State of Observability 2022 report. So maybe just before we drill down into the details, a sort of high level, what were the main findings, the things that are of interest?
I mean, just to recap a little bit what the report is. So basically, we surveyed more than 1,200 observability practitioners in different regions in the US, in Asia, and obviously in EMEA and UK. It's mainly observability practitioners, was managers and some technical experts. And what we found, I mean, the big findings is that we basically what we call the beginners, and I will explain that maybe a little bit later, but people that are just starting with observability. So the percentage of new adopters of observability doubled compared to last year. So it means that people is really into the observability thing right now. So it's taking over, but it's still new because it's the beginners. So usually people that has less experience about observability. And what we've seen, so there's this phenomenon about doubling the number of people adopting the observability practice, I would say. And the other aspect is for the leaders, so the ones that have way more experience. Basically, we've seen that they are 2.1 times as likely to say that they can detect problems in applications that developed internally in minutes compared to hours for others. So basically, they can detect things faster, and they have, I think it's 69%. Basically, they have a better mean time to resolution for unplanned downtimes or performance degradations, because now we say slow is done you down, and also the cost. I mean, the impact is way smaller when you are, I would say, a leader compared to a beginner in observability. Just to give you an idea, we compare in dollars, and I think I need to do the conversion in pounds, but it's 2.5 millions for the leaders. That's the impact, the average impact for the downtime with on a business critical application, compared to almost 24 millions for beginners. So the impact is way huge, because obviously, I mean, the longer you have an outage, I mean, the money keeps, the increasing. So that's the overall findings.
And in terms of, I mean, you've as you've answered that, you've given a fairly good idea of different levels, but I think the report discovered, or you've categorized it, the people that responded to the survey into this beginning category, sort of intermediate, and the sort of leaders. So just some idea. I mean, the beginners are sort of wet behind the ears, maybe just start. Can you just give us a brief outline of what each of those categories covers in terms of their experience of observability?
Yes, I mean it's clear that there's four, I would say, criteria. The first one is obviously the experience, for how long you have been into the observability field, right? Looking for the unknowns and searching for that data that is missing to understand the performance and the availability of your application. So if you are a beginner, basically you have less than 12 months, right? If you are an intermediate, it's between 12 to 23 months, and we consider leader somebody that has more than 2 years of experience with observability. That's the first criteria. The second is the ability you have to correlate data across all the observability tools you have, whatever it's the APM, a log management system, an infrastructure monitoring, a cloud monitoring tool, whatever. So if you have this ability to correlate data across these different tools, then it helps to classify you beginner versus a leader and so on. The third criteria is the progress in your vendor, that's a very difficult word for a French guy, sorry, rationalization, right? So it's try to avoid to have a lot of different vendors to get visibility, because basically it's kind of related to the previous one. You need to correlate data, you need to get the context moving from a trace to a log to a metric and so on. So if you're using different vendors and so on, it's kind of a little bit more complex. And the last but not least, is about how mature you are adopting machine learning and AI technologies to, I would say, enhance your observability tool sets. Because one of the side effects of observability, the more your systems are observable, the more data you have, because now there's no more unknowns. but you still have the same amount of people, right? So the difficulty is how you will absorb this volume of data. So you need some kind of help. And this is where machine learning and AI are important. So depending on these four criteria, experience, ability to correlate data across tools, vendor rationalization, and machine learning adoption, you classify beginner, intermediate, or leader.
Okay, and in terms of the reasons or the main reason people switch on to observability, did the survey uncover a sort of a key catalyst for that, or is there a range of reasons why people are looking at it?
That's a good question. I mean, observability, as you know, it started a few years ago in the DevOps community. And one of the key reasons is related to the fact that we now change the way, for instance, we're coding. So we're moving from monolith to distributed applications, so microservices and so on. But also is the kind of infrastructure that you use to run those microservices. So we're moving from VMs to containers to serverless and so on. So it's very difficult now to understand this new environment. So one of the reasons why people start talking about observability is that we discovered that there is a lot of, as I said, unknown unknowns that we have that we need to capture to understand what is the final user experience that we're providing. What is the overall availability and performance of this application running in this multi-cloud environment, because that's the reality, and even more in the UK, because we found, for instance, that UK is more advanced than the average in terms of multi-cloud and public cloud adoption. And that's one of the main reasons why people start looking into this observability thing is, do I have the data that I need to understand what is the performance for the end user? And you quickly find out that you maybe not have the right tool. Having a traditional APM, now you need a distributed tracing tool to understand the transaction in this distributed environment. You maybe need to stop doing sampling, because by doing sampling, you're missing data. And now if you want to extend your capability to understand at the single user or single container level, you need to get all the data. You need the full fidelity approach. So that's the main reasons why people started looking at observability. Is we moved into a microservices world. We moved into multi-cloud environments with containers and so on. Now it's in production. Now it's time to understand how the hell all these things are working together, and what is the final user experience.
Okay, and I mean, if we perhaps combine those two, so if we bring observability and cloud together, did the survey sort of uncover what level of skills or absence of skills maybe were in organizations, combining the sort of knowledge about these technologies and the ability to use them, for business benefits?
Well, I mean, skills and knowledge is an interesting topic. Even just having the resources is already a big challenge, right? Because what we found, for instance, is 75% of the respondents said that the leader of their application development organization is really under pressure to increase their cloud fluency. They need to understand better these cloud services that they are using. And also the application development executives, at least in the leader organizations, they are under the most acute pressure, with 47% reporting that this pressure that they have is extreme in the leaders organization versus the beginners, where it's only 29%. So they need to make sure that they have the knowledge and they have the skills in the organization. And that's, once you find out that you need observability, especially in the leader side, now you find that there's more and more pressure to deliver just use more of these new technologies. And you find out that basically now you're using the technology, but it's time to understand it better, I would say, dive a little more into the details. So you need to upgrade the level of knowledge and the skills, and very often recruit new people to just deal with the complexity, because you think you buy something online with a credit card on the cloud, and you have a serverless environment, and then the magic happens. But the reality is very different. It's a lot of different services. They're not always the same between AWS, GCP, Azure, and whatever. They all work in different ways. So we need to architect them differently. and so on. So it's an important need to make sure that you have the right skills and the knowledge to do the run phase properly.
In terms of the actual sort of benefits that people are getting from observability, again, maybe at the I think you alluded to some of them, in your initial answer about the sort of high level findings. But in terms of the three groups you've identified, I'm wondering, I mean, things like sort of payback on investment, faster development times, speed of innovation. I mean, what sort of things did the survey uncover when it comes to the undoubted benefits of observability tools?
Well, you mentioned, I mean, you're right, you mentioned some of them, but the first one is obviously visibility. That's the overall idea of observability, right? So now that you can see things, you can fix things faster, right? And we found that 66% of the leaders report that their visibility into the application performance is now excellent, compared to 44% of the beginners. So there's a big difference, because now they have I would say the right tool set, they have all the context, they can correlate data and so on. So basically the system is now observable, so they have better visibility, so you can fix stuff faster, obviously. The second is confidence, right? Basically, when you have a mature observability practice, it improves your confidence in the ability you have to deliver an excellent and reliable, I would say, digital experience, because everything is 0 and 1s nowadays. And that's help also when you're delivering, how fast you can deliver the software, how the relation between the different teams that are involved is improved, because now everybody can trust the data, they're using the same source of truth and so on. And at the end, that's basically one of the key benefits is more innovation and more, a faster digital transformation, because we're still in this phase. But to be a little bit more specific in the benefits, obviously, faster development times, quicker innovation, and quicker transformation. I would say that the main ones that are reported by the leaders.
Okay, and also I think back at the start of the headline, I think there was quite a startling difference between sort of the leaders and beginners in terms of the cost to resolve an IT problem. Is that right? Or the cost of an IT problem reduces significantly. Is that right?
Yeah. So in terms of cost, and in particular cost of downtime and so on, we asked them, okay, what is the average cost of your downtime? And then we multiply that by the number of, the annual number of outages and their typical duration, and classify that by leaders, intermediate, and beginners. And obviously, there is a meaningful advantage for the observability leaders. So let me find that in pounds to the conversion. So the leaders, for instance, if as I said, so in dollars it was 2.5 million. So I think this is a little bit less than £2 million. That's the cost. I would say the average cost for the leaders. It's 6.2 million pounds for the intermediates, and a little bit more than 18 million pounds for the beginners. So obviously, when you do the math, basically, the more you're leader in the observability, the less it will cost you in terms of downtime, because obviously, again, you can detect it faster, you can fix it faster, you can provide the solution if it's a bug and so on faster. And it's all about, I know it's easy to say that, but time is money, and that's a classic example.
Okay, and maybe, just to sort of follow up, strikes me the speed you've alluded to, the time frames perhaps that from beginners through to, but is it possible for a company really sort of committed to observability to move from beginner to leader? I don't know, is there a minimum time frame just because they have to get used to it, or depending on how committed they are?
Well, that's a difficult question, because it depends on the size of the organization, obviously, right? We've seen a lot of digital natives that go faster than more traditional companies, and that's also different on the countries, right? And the different culture. but I would say if you usually it's not only in question of technology. We say that you need to have the right tools, obviously, to make the systems observable. You need to make those tools talk, or at least provide you with context so you can really understand it. But then you also need to make sure that you have the people, because it's all about the people that will use these tools. And we found, for instance, in the case of UK, where one of the key issues is having the right people to run the ops part of DevOps, I would say, and that's usually slowing down the adoption, which is quite interesting, because UK, it's 2% of the leaders are from UK, and the average, 2% of the respondents in the UK are in the leader phase, compared to on average 11 for other countries, which for me was quite interesting, because UK has always been quite advanced in EMEA, I would say, compared to other countries by adopting technologies and so on. And that's what we see, because on the other side, UK is ahead on multi-cloud adoption compared to other countries, but not in the leader phase. And some of the main reasons is, again, getting the right people and getting the right skills, and getting also the support from management to perform this transformation to observability. So that's a long answer. I don't think there is a way to go faster if you don't have the people, right? So it's tools, they are there, right? Now there's the technologies available. We are an example, but it's not only about the tools. It's having the people, having the skills to make use of this data once the system is observable.
Okay, and just looking at the tools for a minute, as you say, they're already there, but there's a sort of a fair variety of them. So did the survey look at the different types of observability tools being used, and maybe sort of following up that, if it did you sort of come to any conclusions as to which tools were giving people better results, more benefits than others? So really about what the survey may or may not have uncovered about the tools being used.
So, we didn't went into all the details of every single tool, and that's maybe that's an interesting question for next year, maybe. But we did have some interesting feedback, and mainly in the number of tools they're using. So interesting, when you are a leader, in fact, the average they're using 15 tools to basically try to understand what's going on, compared to, I think, the average was 10 for intermediate. But what we're also seeing is that 79% of the respondents, they say that their organization has been adding more tools to their observability portfolio. Because again, what you're searching is for the unknowns, and sometimes you don't know which ones, and you need maybe a different tool to find these new unknowns. I give you the, as I said a little bit earlier about an APM versus distributed tracing, right? APM is a great tool that has been there for many years and tell you where the bottleneck is my database or whatever. But in a distributed environment like microservices, you need something a little bit different, right? You need distributed tracing. You need something that can collect every single transaction and not sample it, because you need to troubleshoot now at the level of an individual user and things like that. So people are in fact having an existing tool set, and what the survey, the findings are that they're adding more tools, right? But at the same time, they're trying, and that's 48% of the respondents, they're trying to partnering with fewer vendors, because it's nice that you have a lot of tools, but they need to tell you a story, right? Tools just give you data that doesn't give you exactly what you're looking for. What is my root cause? You need to investigate. So having the need is to have more visibility, adding more components, but from fewer vendors, because then all the components of your tool set can talk, and you can move from one place to another, from a transaction from a user into, is this coming from this specific container or whatever, and going back and forth, and also be adapted to the different audiences, because now in the DevOps environment, it's not only the traditional ITOps and sysadmins that's gonna watch these tools. You have the developers, you have the SREs, you have the cloud ops, and so on. So those also the tool set needs to be adapted to this audience. They don't use, if you take the example of logs, the developer doesn't look at logs the same way that maybe a sysadmin will look at it. So there is an addition into the tool set, but trying to make this work more like a Lego, so they can plug and not having a Jenga when you're adding tools, but at the end it just falls. So maybe that's a way to put it.
No, that's great. And I think the last time we chatted, which was, I can't remember if it was before the pandemic was on the horizon, but it was a while back. I think we were talking more about AIOPS than observability. So I'm intrigued because I have followed AIOPS quite closely, and then this, the term observability has cropped up. So is AIOPS a subset of observability? Has AIOPS become observability? What's the relationship between those two?
Oh, that's an interesting one. So I'm not an analyst, so I won't pretend that I can provide you all the details. But what we see obviously is that there is an obvious need for AIOps when you're doing observability, and it's just logic, right? I mean, it's logical. The more you get data from your observability tool set, so the more these unknowns become knowns, but at the end it's just data, right? The more you will have a problem, which is interesting because, okay, now I have better visibility, but then I have a problem, which is what can I do with this data? So this is again where AIOps and all the machine learning can help you as an SRE, or again, a cloud ops or whatever, to consume this data, because it's a huge volume. It's nice that you have, for instance, all the traces in your distributed environment for your microservices, but if this millions of lines of information that you need to digest, that's not possible, right? So this is where machine learning will help, not only reducing the noise, but also pointing directly into the root cause for you and so on. So with the same team, you can digest a volume of data that is multiplied by X. So it's, once the system is observable, once you have your first stage of observability done, you really need to have AIOps, because you don't want to have the side effects, which is get the tsunami of data becoming even bigger. So that's the tool that works very well. I mean, the AIOps tools with the observability ones, and I think the analysts from the conversation I had are start grouping these concepts together. So I'm expecting also the analysts to say that this is kind of somehow maybe not merging, but there is a clear relation between the two. You completely right on that.
Yeah, and in terms, I mean, earlier you said perhaps the most important thing is having the people to see through the observability projects. There's one thing to have the desire, I guess, to have the right amount of people, but they clearly got to have the necessary set of skills. And I mean, the IT industry in general seems to be under pressure in terms of finding the right people to do the jobs. Is that the same in the observability space, or because it's new and exciting, are there lots of people skilling up, and if you need people, you'll find them? What's the position there with regard to people?
Well, I mean, I think if I remember well, 95% of the respondents, they reported a challenge in finding IT operations staff, right, to monitor and manage the infrastructure and the application availability. So basically using the observability tools, at least the ops parts of DevOps, even if again it's observability is for everybody in the CI/CD pipeline, I would say. And it's today very difficult to find people. But what is interesting with observability is this. It's also helped to recruit new talents, right? When you need to search for young students out of the engineering, computer engineering schools or whatever, they want to use the latest and the greatest technology. They don't want to play with legacy, unfortunately. But that's the sad reality. So having also a tool set that is modernized helps to recruit. But currently, there is a huge lack of people. And not only in the UK, this is something that we see in most of the regions, and you get the details in the report. And so that's on the observability side, but also just by using the existing tools that from the different cloud providers. Because as I said, I mean, even if we think that we have a container and it works everywhere, that's not exactly the case. You need specific expertise. The cloud providers give you a service, so you don't have access to the hardware. So you need to have expertise internally to find ways to get details that you need, right? There is a, I'll give you a technical example, this eBPF thing, this extended Berkeley packet filter thing, that most people is excited to understand how the network works in the cloud environments, because again, you don't have access to the hardware anymore. So you need to have the expertise to find workarounds to get the data you need to make sure that your application is working as expected. And I give you the example of the network because, as I said, slow is the new down, and this new world of microservices, the network is really critical nowadays. So so it's important to again make sure that you have the right skills. And it's not because things are outsourced that they are just easier. It's a complex portfolio that they have, and this is something that's basically, whatever the region, people are really lack of the right skills and just finding people. But they're using the latest technologies to also help recruit the students and so on.
And in terms of the future, did you survey ask any questions or come up with any conclusions as to how observability might develop over time, whether it's the uptake of it by people or just the tools available, etc.? What's the landscape look into the future? Was that something that was covered?
Well, to be honest, I mean, we're just starting. As you've seen, I mean, we just doubled the number of beginners, so people are just starting with that. So it's I mean, making your system observable with the help of AIOPS, it's already the future. Not everybody is already there. I mean, again, if you look to the percentage, the number of leaders is quite small compared to the intermediate and the beginners. So we're starting that journey. Some are obviously more mature than the others. They're just confirming that there is a huge amount of benefits by becoming a leader and jumping into this observability practice. But it's making a rationalization of your tools, making sure that you have all the right ones to transform these unknowns into knowns, and then make sure that you have the skills and the technology to help your people, your staff, to digest this. This is already for many people the future. The only thing is that it's a future that is available now, but it's a process to I would say integrate that into your existing processes and tool set and so on. Because we are not all digital natives company that started a few months ago and started from a blank page and let's go directly to the latest and greatest.
Okay, and you sort of hinted at, well, you gave some sort of advice there, I guess, and I think the report came up with some sort of conclusions or key recommendations for folks. So perhaps you could share those with us.
Well, I mean, we discussed it quite a while, but I need to say it again. You need to build to attract talent and invest in the training, making sure that you have the right skills. That's the number one, because again, first you need to understand that you have unknowns, right? And to know that you have unknowns, you have to have some mindset and some skills to understand that this new technologies that I'm now using in the cloud, what is the kind of data do I need? What do I need to change in my environment to make sure I understand that? Because again, the cadence, just take the cadence in the cloud. I mean, why would you monitor something every minute when you have technologies that can live and die and disappear in milliseconds? When your customers can leave your application after 2 seconds and you won't even know it, right? It's just a very basic example like that. So, but to know that, you need to have the skills. So again, you need to attract the talent, you need to have the people, and you need to train people to this new environment and give them then with the right tool set. The second is, once this is done, is think to the next step, okay? Don't just plan for observability, plan for observability and AIOps at the same time. Because as soon as the systems are observable, then the tsunami will arrive of events and incident tickets and whatever. So if you don't have AI to help you, that's going to hurt. So it's just think about the next step. It's not complicated now. Machine learning is available as a feature. You don't need a PhD in mathematics to use it and so on. So, but make sure that you have the right assistance with AIOPS when you're moving into observability. And the third one is be careful. Be careful because it's all about silos, as always. So it's nice that you improve your visibility by adding more tools, but make sure that if the tools can talk together, or at least go for fewer vendors, because we have seen that this is what that's a strategy that the leaders have been adopting, and we see that they had a great result. So that's kind of the feedback from the study.
Okay, and maybe just as we finish, you work for Splunk, obviously. So I'm intrigued as to your company's journey with AIOPS stroke observability. You know, what it is you're interested in, what you bring to the market, and you know, there's not too much to ask, plans for the future as well. So that's quite a lot. But yeah, feel free to sort of pick and choose what you want to tell us.
Okay. Well, interesting enough is I think we started doing observability even before knowing it was a word, because as a data platform, we have been collecting data from existing tools from our customers, whether it was an APM, an infrastructure monitoring, and so on, and try to provide visibility. And then we added the AIOPS. What really changed, what we've done a few years ago, a couple of years ago, is focusing more. What are the new unknowns that we don't have? So we have this approach of observability, of getting logs, metric, traces, everything into one place, and make sure that we can consume it through AIOPS and so on. But there were this new change we've seen, like anybody else, using microservices, running them into serverless environments and so on. So this new cadence and things like that. So we have been improving our portfolio to make sure that this new kind of data can be managed by Splunk. So we moved into a streaming technology to make sure that we collect things in real time, because again, now it's about milliseconds. We don't talk about minutes anymore. We moved into a way to collect all this data in a more simple way. So for instance, we promoted a lot Open Telemetry, which is an open source project to collect all the different kind of data you need to make your system observable. So log, metrics, and traces with one single open source agent. And Splunk is a major contributor of the Open Telemetry project. And last but not least is adding the different tools that you need to not only, we started obviously as a log solution, but years ago, we provided also the metrics and the traces and so on. Now we have distributed tracing in our portfolio. We have real user monitoring to extend this trace thing to the last mile, to the end user. So the real user monitoring, what we call the synthetic monitoring, so digital experience monitoring. So how your application is performing from the outside of the cloud environments and so on. So and the idea is we try to follow what basically the study is saying, is having all the tools that you need with fewer vendors. And that's what we have been pursuing, is trying to be one of these fewer vendors that can provide all the tool set that you need to make sure that your system is observable, but you can get the benefits with AIOPS and consume it.
Okay, and maybe just finally, I promise, in terms of, as you say, there are a lot of people, beginners there, so that, and there's, I guess, pre-beginners, if you like, a lot of people who haven't quite started but are looking at solutions. I mean, are there any key sort of must, you know, if they're evaluating an observability platform, what are the key must-haves for people, you know, to know about when, you know, so they don't end up going maybe down a bit of a blind alley?
So there's obviously, everybody says there's 3 pillars or 4 pillars of observability, right? The log, metrics, traces, and events. So you make sure, obviously, I mean, everybody already has a cloud monitoring solution from the different cloud vendors, because they're just provided de facto plus their infrastructure monitoring. But you need to make sure that you have a distributed tracing tool, right? Or at least a modernized APM as a minimum to understand the transaction. Nowadays, there is this real user monitoring, which was kind of very popular, like maybe 15 or 20 years ago. I do remember, because I'm vintage, and now it's becoming the cool kid again, because I mean, everything is digital. All the interactions between organizations and their customers are digital. So you need to understand the last mile. So making sure that you have a real user monitoring solution, ideally also maybe some synthetic, but already with real user monitoring, with distributed tracing, APM, and an infrastructure monitoring based in logs, plus some kind of AIOPS. With that, you have the minimum. There is stuff you can add. As I said, synthetic monitoring is a very nice addition to the tool set, for instance, and others. But with those ones, you have the bare minimum to make sure that you can understand your hybrid environments, because also you need to make sure that this is not only working for cloud, but our world is hybrid. So you may have part of your transaction that end up in a mainframe if you are in finance or insurance, on premises and so on. So also making sure that those solutions can deal with hybrid environments and not only pure cloud.
Okay, well, I have taken up quite some of your time, and I'm really grateful for that. So, Stéphane, thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Thanks.